Session, Mayor and City Council meeting, 4 p.m. Wednesday, January 9th, 2019, City Hall Council Chambers. I call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, please.
Yes, I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Take a seat. Members of the City Council, we're going to deviate from the actual agenda. So what we're going to be doing is presentation of the parking meters will be A.
Okay.
B will be presentation of educational requirements. C will be presentation of body worn camera, and D will be presentation of law enforcement accreditation program. So with that saying that, we'll start with the presentation of parking meters, and Chief, you're going to be doing that for us? Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Tata, I guess I'm putting my name in history here as I'm the first presenter of an official agenda here as you as mayor, Mr. Mayor. Congratulations. I'd like to welcome you and
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lopez, Mr. Rojas again,
Thank you.
Mr. Rojas, and obviously the incumbent City Council. I look forward to working with you and not only meeting but exceeding the public's expectations as far as public safety or anything, any services that need to be provided to you.
Thank you, sir.
So with that said, we're going to start a presentation. I'm going to give you a little bit of background as far as to the meter issues that we've had. And I can only go back 34 years because I haven't been here for 35. So the last 34 years, I can tell you that our meter system has been inconsistently or historically inconsistent in three fashions. Number one, in enforcement. Number two, in compliance. And number three, in infrastructure. So what is it that I mean by enforcement? Well, enforcement, we do random enforcement of these meters. So if there's parking control officers enforcing meters or parking violations on Morty, obviously they can't be on Sonoita at the same time, or on Terrace at the same time, or in Grand or Arroyo. So that's what I call random enforcement, and it's not consistent enforcement. So that's what I'm saying, that it's inconsistent enforcement. As far as to compliance, it's been inconsistently also inconsistent as far as to compliance. There's people that in the downtown area that don't feed the meters, and when the parking control officer gets there, you see all kinds of people running out of the storefronts and feeding the meter just to make sure they don't get ticketed. And number three is infrastructure. The infrastructure that we have, it's a little bit newer than the one that we had when I was a parking control officer 34 years ago, but it's not that far advanced from what we used to have. Now it runs on batteries, but just like every other technology, eventually the components of the infrastructure is going to be obsolete because they're going to stop making it. So with that, I was looking at how do I use technology to assist our parking control issue. About 8 months ago, I assisted Arizona Association of Chiefs of Police conference in Boston, Nevada, and I met with some representatives from MPS parking, and I talked to them, and they came down and they gave a couple of presentations, which Mr. Felix was part of one of them. And they've been down here a couple of times and looking at logistics. They worked with Unisource and some other people as far as to how to, if the program that they have is viable to implement in Nogales. And so once they did that, they found that it was a viable solution that they could have. And they suggested that we do a 30-day pilot program. However, the pilot program will not be done until or unless you guys approve it. This meter system, what I like about this meter system is that it's consistent with enforcement. It'll be consistent with compliance and be consistent with infrastructure. Basically, the infrastructure belongs to MPS. It doesn't belong to us. They get a percentage of the proceeds, but I'm not even going to get into that. I'm going to give Mr. Brian Cassidy here the floor so he can explain what we mean by that, or what he means by that. But in the past, we've been trying to clear the downtown area of blight, of abandoned vehicles, of vehicles stored in the roadway. We've tried to implement a residential parking program on Crawford Street, on West Street, on Sonoita, and on Elm Street. And we haven't been successful because once we crack down on those vehicles that are parked in the residential areas, all they do is they move up to the metered parking spaces up on Sonoita or up on Terrace, right? And as of a couple of weeks ago, we have 100% of those meters working, but it was a give and take. It all depends if they were working or not working, and these people do their background, or they look at the meters that are not working. So that program was not a viable one because we couldn't do consistent enforcement of the residential parking program that we wanted to implement. So with this program, with the MPS meter system, since it's going to be consistently enforced throughout, and there's no need for an actual parking control officer to be physically giving these citations, we can redirect those resources and have them worry about and take care of parking issues around the city, not necessarily in the downtown area. With that, we can go ahead and implement it will help us implement, actually, a residential parking program in the areas of Crawford, in the areas of Sonoita, West, and Elm Street. And I know those people, the residents complain all the time that there's people parked there, they just leave their cars and they walk into Mexico, or they leave their cars waiting for importation into Mexico, or they basically work in Mexico and they come back. So when the residents of those streets get there, there's no place to park because the parking spaces that are reserved, should be reserved for them in front of their houses, are taken already. That's one of the things that I liked about the MPS program. The other one that I like is that every parking meter has a camera that's working 24/7. Those cameras can obviously, the recordings could be viewed if we need to, especially for the business community. Those cameras can take care of your storefront, actually. So it can be turned in a way, Mr. Cassidy, tell me if I'm wrong, it can be turned in a way that it's watching your storefront, so when something happens, that is 100% recorded. These meters also have the ability to do advertisement for businesses. They have the ability to do notices for emergencies. And they also have the ability to make 911 calls out of those meters also. I think with the negative rhetoric that we've had being a border town, and the tourism that has dropped significantly because of the fear that they have of coming into Nogales, I think that'll help with the safety issue of us selling our city, of saying not only do you have officers, but you have parking meters, you have cameras, you have the ability to walk downtown and have the safety that somebody's watching you, or law enforcement is watching you, and the ability to dial 911 at a push of a button if you need to. So there's a lot of components, there's a lot of pluses why I like this system that they have. So without any further ado, I'm going to present to you Mr. Brian Cassidy. He's the CEO of MPS, and he can give you more information and logistics as far as to how this meter works and percentages and stuff like that. And I guess if you have any questions afterwards, I can also answer them, but my recommendation is that we at least do a pilot program to see how it works. I mean, it has so many things, so many components behind it. Also, my understanding is that if you park your car and put in for half an hour of parking fees, and you overstay for an hour or an hour and a half, you can come back as long as you make that hour and a half right, and you put in whatever amount of money that you need to put in for that hour and a half, you won't get a citation, right? So basically, we can program those meters however we want and to our needs. So without any further, I
Chief,
want to turn it
one
over to
question,
Brian
Chief.
Cassidy.
Citation will be mailed to your house?
Yes, sir.
How are you going to do it for Mexican vehicles?
That's something that that he can
Okay.
explain.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members for having me today.
Welcome.
You know, as the chief said, you know, we think that we have a system that is technology that's second to none, and it does so many things. It's kind of hard to put them all in one presentation. This presentation that I'm going to give you is focused first on parking, and then we'll get to safety and security at, you know, on the second half or at the end of it. But I want to make sure that you understand how the system works, how it operates, because we feel truly we built, you know, a great system that's flexible, that provides needs for consumers. It's much easier for consumers to use. Also provides for, you know, patrol officers, parking control officers, provides for a better, safer working environment for them. And finally, provides a lot of safety and security features for local law enforcement. Just getting into it, you know, summary, you know, here's what I'm going to tell you, is that, you know, we've designed the system, it's all part of a platform, a software platform called the Sentry system. And the important part about that is we're a software company. Although there's a lot of hardware involved, and the hardware is very expensive, our key to life is our ability to develop a system that's completely flexible, can be programmed any way you want it. Which you've already mentioned some of the different things you can program. Most of the things I'm going to talk about today, you can actually pick and choose from. You can say, I want that feature, I don't want that, I want that, I don't want that. We can turn them on and off at will. Okay? So if you see things in here that you like, you'll get them. If you see things in here that you say, wait a second, maybe I don't want that, you can simply turn it off. And if you see things, or if you think of things that you might want the meter to do that we haven't thought of, you can always come to us and say, hey, can it do this? And if it can't, we might be able to program it. Okay? What these meters do at heart, it's just like almost like having an attendant at every single meter. They allow for a touchless meter payment if need be, or a traditional meter payment, okay, at the meter, and allow for what we call remote enforcement. And remote enforcement is pretty simple. It's what the chief enunciated before. The enforcement is taken right to that meter. It can be done remotely. The evidence can be reviewed remotely, and officers can be free to be elsewhere going about their business. They come back later and they can batch process, or they can process in real time. What we find with these systems is when you put them in, is that you get a huge step change in your revenues and your compliance. And I'll get to why that is. But that's what makes this system so compelling. Just getting into what the meters look like. Okay. There's two pieces of equipment that we would have on the curbside. One would be the meter, and one is what we call a cam stick. There's a view of it. I'm not going to belabor it too much. You can see what most consumers see is visually appealing, is it has a touchscreen display. That's basically an iPad. So if you can envision anything that you can put on an iPad, you can put on that touchscreen display. Beyond that, consumers can pay with a coin, they can pay with a credit card, there's a swipe machine in there. As the chief indicated, there's cameras all over this thing. There's cameras in the back, what we call the back, that face the street and look down at license plates and at cars as they pull in. There's also an optional camera that does face the sidewalk. So for business owners, if you've got a meter in front of your store, you're going to have the ability 24/7 to have a visual record of what's going on in front of your store. And indeed, what's going on all up and down the street. The cam sticks have the exact same visual technology, license plate reading technology embedded in them. They just don't have all the payment mechanisms, etc. The reason we have cam sticks, especially in states like Arizona, where there's only a backplate requirement and not a front plate requirement, is to ensure that we get either a backplate or a front plate image. We have to have a ratio of at least 1 meter to 1 cam stick. So we'll always be looking either the front or the back of a car and capturing the necessary images. Let me tell you the way the system works. Okay, simplicity. We install these devices. These are for parallel parking, but they can also be for head-in parking. Given a parallel parking example that you see here, what would happen is a car pulls up to a space, just as they normally would. Now, in the best possible world, the consumer has decided that they want complete convenience, and they subscribe to a service that's just like Easy Pass or Sun Pass and some of the other kind of toll operations that you've seen, where as the car pulls up, it can read your license plate, and if you have an account, it'll debit your account for the amount of time you're there. It knows you're there. You don't have to do anything. It's totally touchless. Okay? Totally consumer friendly. You also have the option of getting out and paying the meter if you want. If you don't subscribe, you can get out and pay a coin, credit card, the whole bit. You even have a mobile app you can pay via your phone through a mobile app. As a matter of fact, I could be standing here right now and I could pay for parking out on the curbside if I wanted to. Okay? So when a car pulls into the spot, the meter recognizes it, says there's a car pulling up. Okay, I see, I recognize the license plate, I've got it. One way or the other, the person pays. Or let's assume they don't. First, if they pay, they go about their business, they pay for their allotted time, maybe they refresh, maybe they pay for some more time, whatever. They drive away, they're in compliance, they've never violated, they're good, no harm, no foul. Let's suppose somebody pulls up and they don't pay, or someone pulls up and puts half an hour worth of time on the meter and they stay for an hour and a half. Well, if they don't correct that situation, and as the chief has alluded to, we have ways they can actually, after the fact, correct that situation. But if they don't correct that situation, the meter is going to recognize that and say, based on what the city has told us about their parking regulations, this looks like a violation to us. And it's going to take the visual evidence of that car coming in, that car staying at the meter for a certain amount of time, or for an abnormal length of time, whatever it is. They're going to take the payment information from that meter and package all that information up together and put it in a data pack and send it off to the city. Okay? That's the second step. Your parking control officers are going to get all of these data packets, which is going to consist of all this evidence, which is going to show exactly what happened in that parking session. And they're going to have a chance to review that evidence and look at it and determine for themselves whether they think it's a violation or whether there's extenuating circumstances that would lead you to be maybe a little more lenient with someone, et cetera, et cetera. If they believe then in their estimation that there is a violation and the evidence supports it, then at that point they can accept the violation, press a button, and the process of actually generating a ticket, printing it out, mailing it, all that can be automated so it's sent directly to the registered vehicle owner's address, using the license plate recognition technology, et cetera, and doing a DMV lookup, just as you would if an officer was walking around or driving around with an LPR car and using the same function. It basically takes that LPR technology and puts it right at the meter. Okay? Now, I mentioned before the need for different configurations. So in this city, you would probably have that top box on the left, which is the meters and cam sticks, and that's where you get the look at the back plate. If the city wished and didn't want meters everywhere, there are some cities that would like to reserve some curb appeal, and they determine that meters don't look good, although we think ours look beautiful and show them everywhere. But you can actually have a kiosk type environment where you just have the sticks at every space, and you have one pay station per block. If you want to go the furthest extreme, down in the right-hand corner, you can actually just have the cam sticks posted everywhere, and you can pay by phone and phone only. There are a lot of cities that we're in where they don't have meters anymore, they don't even have pay stations, where it's simply you pay by phone, either by calling the number or by using a mobile app. Either way, we can accommodate with either the cam sticks or the meters. Now, why is this all important for parking? It's simple. We have this data, no one else has this data, because no one else has a system like ours that can actually calculate this data. We know that 50% of the people who pull up to a metered space never bother to pay. And the reason they never bother to pay is because they know what the chief knows and what every law enforcement officer will tell you is that the logistics of getting around and enforcing and policing every single space at every single moment are so challenging that the average person is never going to get taken. If you talk to experts in the industry, they believe that 10% of violators get ticketed. I can tell you right now, factually, it's about 1%. That's not an indictment of officers, parking control. It's just a fact. You logistically cannot get around. So, with our system, though, because we built in the fail-safes and there's photo enforcement, that doesn't happen. On the surface, you may say, okay, this is really dangerous. We're going to start writing tickets left and right. It's going to be very scary. What really happens in practice is when you put our system in and you properly educate consumers, they understand that if they pull up to a meter and they don't comply with your local parking regulations, they will get caught. So in practice, what people do is they do a math in their head and they say, I can put $1 in the meter and be safe, or I can risk it and pay, you know, in your case, you know, pretty hefty fines. So Arizona's got some really hefty fines when you add on all the, you know, all the state fees and all that. And they generally say, okay, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to start paying the meter. So this is an example of what we see. This is a city about your size. You know, we took a city your size. We put the meters in February. This was February of last year. We arrived at the scene in that city. The compliance rate was about 60% based on our trial data. Okay? We saw in the first month, it went to 72%. Probably because this city didn't do any pre-communication whatsoever about these meters. They just put them in and said, okay, let's just start writing tickets, which was a big mistake. We told them never to do that. They said, that's okay, the public will figure it out. So they started off at 72. You can see what happens over time. It's very quickly, compliance goes all the way up to the 90s. And it usually hovers and stays around the 90s. And that's because typically what happens is you have a subset of the population who is not going to comply because of one of three things. Either for them, they just made an honest mistake. They'd never seen these meters before. They didn't know about it. They thought it was like a normal meter. They didn't realize that they had to complain and comply. And they didn't realize all the features it has for allowing somebody to pay more easily, like the mobile app or the credit card payments, or you know what we call concierge services, which is where they pull up. It's like Easy Pass and it reads the plate and pays for them. Or because they decided that for one reason or another they were entitled and didn't have to pay. There's a fair amount of consumers like that. Or, you know, you also get people who just feel that they're going to, for one reason or another, rebel. And that's typically what you get when you get to that 90%. You really only have about 3% of the population is really population that actually makes an honest mistake. We've seen this everywhere we go. So sometimes cities have a fear that you put the meters in, what's going to happen is you're going to write tickets left and right, etc. In practice, what happens is people say, okay, I'm not about to commit, you know, what isn't a criminal act, but I'm not about to commit, you know, a violation of the parking rules on camera. I'm just going to go ahead and comply. And that's what you end up doing. By the way, something else is a side benefit. When we take those cam sticks that we normally use to read, you know, either the back or the front plate when there's not a meter at that space, we can also put them by no parking zones, fire hydrants, crosswalks, bus stops, etc. And we can enforce or help the city enforce at those spaces as well. We call it a safety stick in that environment. Okay? Just so you know, we can take those on standalone. So to the extent that you have any safety sensitive areas that aren't parking areas, but nevertheless, where there's parking abuses, you can put these in. Okay. Now, what does this do for you as a city? It does, one of the main things it does for you is it causes people to comply with your parking laws and it drives your revenue higher. And that's because people who never paid before start paying. It's that simple. Here's some examples of the kind of revenue increases that this system drives. You can see Vancouver, Palisades Park, New Jersey, Bridgeport, Connecticut. You put these systems in, that little bar on the left, that little tiny bar, that was the revenue per space per month before we put our meters in. Those other bars, the revenue per space per month after we put the meters in. And the reason is very simple. People stop playing games, they start complying, and if they don't comply, they get a ticket, and you're going to be able to ticket 100% of the violators if you choose to. You don't have to choose to. So cities find this, you know, very attractive for capturing revenues and compelling compliance that didn't previously exist. Okay. Now, we've talked a lot about, you know, kind of the basics of the meters, and I've gone into, you know, kind of the aspect of compliance and violations, etc. But we've designed the system to be very consumer friendly. First point, I've talked already about the automatic parking feature, the automatic payment feature. You can pull up just like Easy Pass or just like SunPass. Pull up, it reads your plate, you got an account. You know, you park for an hour, you pay for an hour, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to worry about it. You never get a ticket. That's what we want, okay? We talked before also about the programmable display. That allows for better communication of your parking policies. Because our display is dynamic, we can change it anytime you want. We can change what it says, we can change the look and feel. We can communicate much better with your constituents. You can change the hours, you can change the days of enforcement, you can do ad hoc parking holidays, You don't have to go around and put signage on. You don't have to bag meters anymore. It's all going to be posted right there on the display screen. So there should be no ambiguities around whether or not somebody was having signage or whether somebody is informed. They have a display screen. If they want to, they can open. They can actually push buttons and they can give them frequently asked questions. They can ask questions and say, you know, am I allowed to park here? When am I allowed to park here? All that stuff. It is also be posted right there on the meter. So all that programming can be done anytime you want. You change anything any day of the week. You can call us in the morning and say, guess what? We decided today we're going to have a holiday, a parking holiday, because for whatever reason you feel like it's a good day for a parking holiday. All the meters automatically go into freezing. You can call up and say, I have one meter that I want to change the rules for. You can change it for 1 meter. You can change it for a block. You can change it for the whole city. The touchscreen also creates an interactive experience for motorists. So, you know, they are more in tune with, they're more in tune with whatever you want to tell them. You know, they recognize it more. It's not kind of a habitual thing where they just walk up and they just do the same old thing. You can communicate with them. You can communicate verbally with them. You even have speakers, so it will speak to the user. The chief in this vein, brought up something very important. You can even enable that touchscreen so that it has a push button 911. So that if you wanted to, anyone can go up to any one of these meters, there's a little 911 button, they can push it, and it'll instantly call the police and say, okay, there's a 911 emergency right here. And that person can actually speak to the meter. It has a microphone. They can actually have a two-way conversation with the police just as they would if they're calling on the phone. Even better, you can do visual mail. Because you have that optional user camera that's looking straight out at the consumer, if you wanted to enable it, you could really have a video conference. The police, EMS, emergency, you could have a video conference with the person who's pushed that button and talk to them and see exactly what's going on at the scene. Again, that's something it's up to you whether you want to enable it, but the function is there. There's also community messaging. You know, the chief mentioned that you could do advertisements. Those advertisements can be advertisements for retail. They can also be advertisements or community messaging for the city. Mayor, if you want to do an announcement to the city, you want to make some kind of announcement, you can do it. Put it on the screen. It's just like coming up on an iPad. We can run that continuously. We can run it every so often, whatever you want. You can literally do a mayoral address live, full television. You could sit here right in chambers, and you could broadcast this meeting if you wanted to throughout the city. It's all up to you what you want to do. And finally, for the local merchants, what this does, you know, we can allow merchants can now advertise on these meters. They can even go so far as to offer validated parking if they wanted to. There's a whole host of things that merchants can do with these meters if they want to take advantage of it. So you could have a restaurant that says, hey, come into our restaurant, we'll pay for your parking. You could have a store that says, if you shop here, we can validate your parking. Buy something here, we'll pay for your parking. We'll validate it for you at that meter. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of benefits for consumers. When it comes to your parking control officers, we use PEO, but parking control officers, the chief is correct. This system is bias-free, it's fair, it eliminates all the guesswork. First of all, it's completely uniform. So there is no more randomness to the patrols. There's no guessing about whether somebody is going to be walking down the street at that time to patrol and ensure that parking enforcement rules are in place and they're being adhered to by the public. Everywhere across the system, no matter where a meter is, it's going to be functioning and it's going to enforce. Okay? And when I say it's bias-free, that's an important thing as well too. There's a difference. There's uniform, which means enforcement is everywhere. The bias-free component is no one can ever come and say, okay, someone is targeting me, targeting my vehicle, targeting my store, targeting my neighborhood, etc. The system doesn't know. It doesn't know whether somebody's driving an expensive car or an inexpensive car. It doesn't care whether the plates are U.S. plates or Mexican plates. It doesn't care whether it's in a certain area of town, a certain time of day, etc. It merely enforces according to the rules and doesn't apply any kind of moralistic value to it. In addition to that, for the public, it provides comfort to the public that there's no thought of targeting or quotas or all the kind of myths that typically are associated with parking, where people will tell you, okay, it's kind of the end of the month, we got to worry about parking here because the city's going to try to make its money. It doesn't exist with this system. It provides uniform, hassle-free enforcement 24/7. It also removes the POs from dangerous situations. They no longer have to be in a confrontation every time they're writing a ticket. They no longer have to worry about walking down the street and having somebody come up behind them who's irate because they just saw a ticket on their car and they're assuming it's that control officer who's giving them a ticket. They don't have to worry about dogs chasing them. You know, all the things. They don't have to worry about being out in bad weather. They don't have to worry about coming here to these chambers for a meeting like this and thinking, okay, I'm not on the street enforcing. They can enforce anytime they want, from any zone they want, any area. They can even go to a coffee shop, sit there with an iPad, sit there with, they can even do it at home and literally enforce. So it gives patrol officers complete flexibility to do their job, untethers them from the need to walk around. That's part of facilitating the holidays and flexible working arrangements. A lot of cities, that's a big issue. They can't change their hours. They can't change, the days that they patrol, because to do so would require either additional staffing or changing schedules, etc. With this system, you can batch process everything. So you can do it in real time, or you can simply say, we're going to collect all the violations from yesterday and we're going to process them all today. Right? Or we're going to look at the violations and review and improve them. Okay? There's also a whole host of other features. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to go through a couple of them here, but as I said, the thing is programmable so that we can do just about anything. But one of the most important things for most cities is that our system uniquely provides 24/7 parking data support to support enforcement and policy decisions. And what I mean by that is when you install these systems, you have data on what's going on in every single space in the city, 24/7 and analyze. So you can use that to determine whether the enforcement hours are adequate or inadequate. You can look at space turnover and say, do you want to increase it or do you want to decrease it? You can say, do I have enough parking spaces here, enough parking capacity, or my spaces am I always at my max capacity? Expand your hours, anything you want to do. This is the kind of information that typically you'd have to hire a consultant to come in, and they would stand on a street corner and they would count cars, or they drive around in cars and take like a sample. And based on that, charge you tens of thousands of dollars and say, based on that, I think what you should do is change your enforcement hours from 9 in the morning and 6 at night to 8 in the morning to 7 at night. And you should enforce or you shouldn't enforce on Saturday because there is or isn't enough demand. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You're going to have all that data at your fingertips, and you're going to have it anytime you want it for any time frame you want. You can keep this data, you can archive it, so you can literally change your policy seasonally based on what happens in your city and tailor it to the real needs of the city. Okay. I mentioned before about the ability to expand and contract enforcement hours. You can change your hours at any time you want. You could also do even event-based pricing. Change the rates at any time you want, for any space you want. So if you have something going on downtown and you want to encourage people to come and you want to make it a holiday, you could say parking's free or parking's discounted. If you've got a major event and you know you're going to have a lot of out-of-town visitors and parking is going to be a premium, you can say, guess what, for the next 3 hours for this special event, it's $10 an hour for all these spaces. You do whatever you want, event-based pricing. If you wanted to, you can even do demand-based pricing, which is the system is smart enough that if you tell us, hey, if I ever reach 90% occupancy throughout the city, I'm going to change my rates automatically. Kind of like if you've ever done Uber and Lyft and you've done surge pricing, the system can even do that, where it's smart enough that it can sense it. You can tell us exactly what you want the system to do, and it might say, okay, let's tack on a surcharge, an extra $1 because there's no parking space available, and we want to charge an extra $1 to ensure that people are turning over those spaces and they're not parking all day and tying up. And finally, and this especially for Nogales, the system is designed to handle unique challenges in border cities like Nogales. Because it is a software program, we can program a ton of flexibility into it. The flexibility that we program into it are, one, these meters are multilingual, okay? You can program just about any language you want into this. Right now, put a meter on your street, it's going to have a default language, and it's going to have 2 alternative languages that a consumer can choose from, just by pressing a button on the screen. Say, do I want English, do I want Spanish, do I want Portuguese, do I want German, whatever. And it will be displayed. The display will change to that language, and also any audio information that's conveyed. And there's a lot of audio information that you can get from these meters just by pressing a button. It will be changed and will be spoken in that language that they choose. It will accept multiple different currencies. Somebody comes up with coins from different countries, they can put any country's coin that they want, and it will accept it. Somebody can literally say, okay, I'm going to put, we do this a lot in Canada, we have a system in Canada. They'll put in an American quarter, and they'll put in a Canadian quarter. It can differentiate, it can read them, it can actually do the exchange rate, calculations and say, what's that worth here? So they can pay with any currency they want. The LPR technology works with license plates of virtually any country. It definitely works with Mexican plates, I can tell you that right now. So it can read American plates, can read Canadian plates, Mexican plates, etc. It can read also, I already covered front and back. So, you know, in your instance, you're a back plate on the state, that's fine. You know, so you don't really have to worry about that, you'll be covered anyway. But we do have some states where they have a concern where they say, well, gee, we're a front and back plate state. The neighboring state is only back plate only state. What happens then? No problem, we gotta handle it. Okay? We can also handle overseas DMV lookups, I should say overseas, cross-border DMV lookups. So that was a question before about how we would handle situations with cars with Mexican plates. We have access to a database, like the equivalent of the DMV databases here in the US, in Mexico. So we can literally do DMV lookups on Mexican registered vehicles, okay, and get the registered vehicle owner's address, etc. And we can go ahead and handle ticketing internationally, just as you would in the US. The exact same process, only instead we'd be mailing citations when necessary across the border into Mexico. Collecting might be a whole different story, right? That's what the city wants to do. But talking about collecting, we can also initiate an instantaneous dispatch to investigate what we call blacklist vehicles. Now, a blacklist vehicle can be just about any vehicle that you want. If you know a license number, and for some reason you want to, you want to take some action regarding that vehicle, you can do it. Cities normally do it for a couple of different reasons. One, if you have scofflaws, so people who run up an unbelievable amount of tickets and never pay, the system will literally recognize those people. And if you want to, you can enable the system so that if somebody pulls up, even if they pay up and pay the meter like they're supposed to this time, if they've got $500 of outstanding parking tickets that go back 2 years, the minute they pull up, that system can say, here's the license plate you've been looking for, the person who owes $500, and we'll call the tow company, we'll call the boot company, or we'll dispatch an officer, whatever you want to do. And the meter will do it instantaneously. So in the event that you have an issue like that, you can treat it however you want. You can send somebody out to say, to confront. You can just send a tow company out, you can send a boot company out, whatever you want to do. Cities also use this for investigations as well. To the extent that you want to use this feature, you can have a blacklist of vehicles that say, hey, we've got a Bolo. We're going to be on the lookout for this car. And that car just pulled up down here on Grand, and it's at this parking space right now. It's going to call the police. It's going to say, this car just pulled up. Amber alerts, same thing. Silver alerts, same thing. Pulls up, it's going to recognize right away. As a matter of fact, even when it comes to amber alerts and weather alerts and things like that, all that information can also be broadcast automatically across every meter in your city. Okay? Just like right now, I'm sure a lot of you get pings on your phone saying, there's an amber alert, etc. That can be broadcast everywhere in the city so that every resident, whether they got a phone or not, can be aware of those types of situations. And finally, when you get to police investigations, what we find as well too, a lot of times there's witness identification. It's a lot easier for the chief to identify a potential witness to a crime if he's got a list of every license plate number that was in that vicinity at that point in time. If he needs to, if you need to go to that extreme, he can figure out who those people are, he can track them down, he can send his detectives out to say, your car was parked here, it pulled up here at 10 o'clock at night, even if there was a paid parking session, even if the meters we weren't enforcing at the time. Okay? You pulled up at 10 o'clock at night, somebody got hit over the head at 10:05, did you see him? Okay? So you can do investigative work. The underpinning of this is a very complex computer system. As I said, the features are too much to list. I'm getting close to the end of my presentation, being very patient. But I just wanted you to know there's a ton of other features that we can enable here that we didn't even talk about. But I will go into a couple of them. The key is that there's a whole software program that underlies this, and we can program it any way you want. But a couple of the other key things that we didn't really touch on in great detail, but I'll just mention very briefly. The system isn't designed to be a gotcha. It's designed to enable people to pay and incentivize them to pay. And we do that through all the different ways that people can pay and people can get out of tickets. One way is through our mobile app. We have a mobile app somebody can use. I mentioned it before. It can not only, if you have the mobile app on your phone, you can not only identify exactly where there's an open space, the mobile app can give you directions to that open space. You can pay via your phone. The payment will display on the meter. And then if I'm standing here in this room right now and my meter's about to run out, it'll notify me on my phone and they'll say, you've got 15 minutes left. You want to put more time on the meter, and I can do it right from my phone. Okay? So that's a convenience to to parkers and people in the city. And then here's an image, the chief mentioned before about the user cameras. I wanted to present to you and show you, these user cameras. So this is what an image looks like from a user camera. These are actual images from, we took these from Palisades Park, of what it looks like. So those are from images from meters on the street, showing the image of what's going on the sidewalk, and you can see they're clear as day. And you can get those in real time, or you can get them archived, you can go back and do searches, etc. Police use them all the time to solve crimes. It's like having, it's literally like having eye-level video surveillance all on your street. You don't have to have it if you don't want. If you want to purge the data, we can purge it immediately. We can disable the cameras, we can do whatever. But it is a feature that a lot of cities find valuable for law enforcement. One final thing here, and before I conclude, the system is flexible. We program a lot of safeguards into this system. For instance, we have grace periods on the front and back. We don't want cities to ticket people left and right. All we want the people to do is to pay. So when you pull up to a meter, you usually have a grace period. It's usually 5 minutes to get out and decide if you're going to pay the meter or not. You can pull up to a space. You can pull away within 5 minutes. No harm, no foul. If the city wants 3 minutes, they can choose 3 minutes. If they want 10 minutes, they can say 10. From a practical perspective, there's a lot of psychological reasons why 5 makes sense. Because once you start getting a little bit more than that, people tend to gamble a little bit more, and they go back to their old thinking of like, I think I can cheat the system. So I think I can run in that coffee shop and I can get in and out in 5 minutes and not get a ticket, so I'm going to try. So when you kind of don't advise you to stretch it. But you can do things like that. Just like on the back end, you can do the same thing. Just wrapping up, and then you guys feel free to chime in with questions here. If you're interested in the systems, here would be the next step. The next step, as the chief said, is we could do a free 30-day trial on your streets. We would come and we take like a block, and we would install these things on a temporary basis. It's very easy to install. It takes a day. It's no problem. You have the technology working. We wouldn't do any of the enforcement. We would merely capture the data, and we would show you the enforcement capabilities, but we wouldn't expect you to mail tickets or anything. You would continue to enforce the way you normally would manually by doing patrols. Okay. After that, we would sit down and say, okay, let's go through the trial data, and I'll tell you exactly what the trial data will show. It'll show that probably somewhere around half of the people who pull up to your meters never pay. I know that because it's that way in every single city. Okay. There'd be a huge percentage of people who don't ever pay. There'd be a smaller percentage of people who pay but overstay at the meter. And we could also tell you all sorts of things about your parking that you never knew. You're making assumptions right now about what areas are busy and when they're busy, and I guarantee you there's going to be some surprises, and you're going to say, I had no idea that either demand was so high at this time of day at that spot, or so low at this time of day, I never would have guessed. Okay? If we're interested, based on everything you've seen in the trial, then we would go ahead and move toward, an agreement. And that's pretty easy too. The agreement, the chief mentioned before, what we do is this technology is very expensive. For most cities, it would be prohibitively expensive to buy it. So we don't even bother trying to sell it. We make it easy for cities by basically financing it for them. So what we do is we operate under a software as a service model where we provide the meters for free. We provide the back office processing of everything. We provide the analytics of the software, do their work to identify potential violations and send that evidence to the city so the city can decide whether or not to act on it. And then on the back end, as the city collects money, then we share in that with you. And we do a licensing fee, a monthly licensing fee where you make your money, we make money too. And that's how we do it so the cities don't have to shell out literally millions and millions of dollars in systems like this. And the way we introduce it is we be very gentle. On the front end, the first 30 days, we do a media campaign, we do a door knock campaign, we do everything possible to educate consumers because we don't want this to be a gotcha. We even would advocate sending out notices for the first 30 days, not actual citations, but in lieu of a citation, you would send out a warning notice saying, guess what, this new system is here, this is the capability of the system, you violated at this meter on such and such a date, here's your visual evidence, here's your citation, here's your photograph of your vehicle there, here's your photograph of your vehicle leaving, here's how long you're allowed to stay, here's how long you stayed. Starting, whatever the date is, February 1st, you will get a ticket for this kind of behavior. Please don't do it. And then after that, we go on. So, I know I went through things as quickly as I could without trying to, I'll state my welcome here. I apologize, it's a little long-winded, but you know, I welcome your questions.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sir, the damage to the equipment, who's responsible?
It's all our equipment, so it's us. The only exception would be if there's an insured accident by a city-owned vehicle, like let's say you had a dump truck that went out of control and mowed down a bunch of meters, we would expect the city would have insurance to cover that kind of thing. But if there's vandalism, or there's a consumer, you know, who would hit a vehicle or what have you, you know, it's our meter. So we would either go back to the vehicle owner and say, hey, you damaged the system, if it's covered by your insurance, or if it's just something there's no cause, it's on us.
How do you get access to the Mexican registration cars?
So there's a third-party vendor that we deal with that has access, and they're tied into the Mexican DMV. There's a company called Salient, okay, and they use data from Mexico. So we've already verified it with them. You know, I'll be honest, we've never had a border town yet this close to before. We have one in Canada, right across the border. But they've assured us that they have access to that database and they can pump it in just as they pump in right now for all the U.S.
Is that an extra cost for us if it's a Mexican car in comparison to a U.S. car?
Typically, no. No, I mean, unless there's something crazy, that would be no extra cost.
Since this system might be cost effective, but we will still have to keep our individual law enforcement officers who patrol the meters on board, because my understanding is that they will make the final decision based on the review of the data.
That's right.
Whether that individual gets a ticket or not.
Yeah, this system is not a replacement of officers. This is a tool for officers to use. It will make officers more efficient. It will allow them to cover much more ground than they previously did. It will allow them to, you know, to enforce better. But it's not designed to be a replacement for officers. Your officers should still be the ones who make the decisions around whether a citation should be issued.
And if the meters are within the vicinity of a neighborhood or in the downtown area, is there an extra cost for the cameras to serve as a mini law enforcement individual by scanning the area and using that as backup? Is there a cost, or is that part of this?
There's an extra cost to the extent that you archive that data. So that data is, those cameras, if you want those cameras on, they're on 24/7, okay? The only cost comes if you said, look, we want you to store, say, 30 days of data. Then, you know, obviously there's a cost to storing data, especially video data. And you could tell us, okay, we want to store, you know, we want to store 5 days worth or 30 days worth or whatever. And we could either store that for you, or if you wanted, we could just give you the data and you can store it however you want to. Right? Cities find it a little more convenient if we store it, but that would be the extra cost.
I see that as a nice enhancement feature for our community, because during the nighttime, instead of having officers there, that individual meter can scan the area for us in case something does happen, and people will know that it's scanning the area.
Absolutely.
And typically, for one of these, let's just use Vancouver, what is the cost that they pay on a monthly basis to you from what they collect?
So what we do is we do a revenue share, and usually we end up doing a 50-50 revenue share. So I'll tell you what's going to happen in the city. What's going to happen is your revenues are going to go up probably between 4 and 5 times what you do right now, what you get right now. That's the way it'll settle out. It might start off like the first month a little bit higher because, you know, there'll be some people who challenge the system, and your violations revenue might be a little bit higher than normal. But once it settles down to that 90% range, you know, you're going to, I guarantee you, you're going to make, you know, 4 or 5 times, your meters will generate 4 or 5 times between both parking revenue and violations revenue. And what we're going to do is we're going to split it. So the city's going to end up making 2.5 times what it did.
Okay. During the 30-day trial period, what is the time frame after the 30 days for the mayor and council to make a final decision?
You know, generally we don't put a deadline on it. Okay. I mean, obviously, you know, we don't want to do a trial and have you guys say, okay, well, you know, our time frame is we're looking at doing something in 2022. You know, if that's the case, we better just wait, because we'll probably come up with something, you know, enhancements that we'd rather you see, you know, that sort of thing between now and then. We'd like for you to decide, you know, fairly promptly, but we're not going to say to you, look, if we don't have an answer by, you know, the end of the month, then all bets are off.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Just, could I just ask? I have two questions. You said that it could scan a store, and it could scan, you could advertise a store.
Sure.
Now, you're going to charge that to the store owner, or what
Yeah.
would you do that?
Yeah, so if a store, so as far as the scanning, okay, the video, okay, is always on. Nobody's got to pay for that. So if the city said, yeah, we want all those user cams, their cams there, that's going to be on. Nobody's going to have to pay for it. If the store wants that video, I guess, yeah, they come to us and say, hey, you know, we want that video, okay, and you know, then we would talk with them. We typically don't have a lot of individual stores that want to do that unless they have a problem. You know, let's say, for instance, you know, there's a bar or something that has, you know, unruly customers, and maybe they face lawsuits because customers come out and they get unruly with bouncers and they start to cause a fight, and the bar owner wants to say, okay, I want bulletproof that I'm not going to be liable for a fight between, you know, a drunk customer and my bouncer who's trying to do the right thing. Then yeah, I could see something like that. We haven't had that happen yet. As far as the advertising, yeah, if you've got, you know, a store and they want to advertise, they would come to us and they'd say, I want to advertise on your meters, and we would, you know, create an advertisement. The city would approve it. We want to make sure that the city looks at all the content, so if there's nothing that's objectionable to anyone, and the city has the right to say, no, we don't like that. But, you know, then, yeah, we would contract directly with that store.
So they would go through you, not through the city?
Yeah. I mean, unless the city has some program, you know, where you're trying to, you know, sell advertising and things of that nature, or you're in that business already. And if you are, I don't know if the city does that already. I assume that there's probably some municipal, you know, there may be some avenue for the city to earn some advertising revenue, you know, in one way, shape, or form, but normally you know, we don't experience that very often.
Mr. Ernest, Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very impressive presentation, very, very impressive. But a couple of questions here. In Arizona, the state of Arizona, is there any city that has this system right now?
No, there isn't. And one of the reasons why is that cam stick that you saw, okay? In order to be economical in Arizona, we need to have both meters and cam sticks. Because, you know, in other states where there's a front and a back plate requirement, we can get by with having a single meter look at two spaces, and we can leverage the business model that way. It wasn't until, you know, about this time last year that we developed a cam stick, so we didn't even start marketing in Arizona until about this time last year. So we haven't had any of the other, and in all honesty, I just hired a sales rep for the Southwest about 6 months ago. So we weren't even targeting the Southwest and specifically Arizona because it was too early, because there are too many other states where, for us economically, it made more sense to be in the states where we didn't have to worry about putting those cam sticks in addition to the meters.
Okay, in California, is there anybody in California, any city in California or New Mexico? Or,
no, in California there's not. Every state has different laws, right? The laws in Arizona permit this technology. In California, it's a little bit, it's ambiguous whether the laws in California will allow for ticketing revenue. So because of that, we haven't marketed it all in California. We do have one city in California that wants the meters, and they claim that they have their interpretation of law has created a situation where they think they can form a loophole in the law. And so they may be in California to sue them, but we're not relying on that. We're not taking a legal position. The city wants to take that legal position, that's fine, but we're not even marketing there because we don't want to be marketing if we think that there's some ambiguity in the law that we don't want to deal with.
in New Mexico or Texas, or what would be the closest state?
No, well, as far as a permanent installation,
right.
Your closest state, your closest location is probably Vancouver. We're not like west of Mississippi. We're not remaining on the East Coast. We're in New Jersey, or Connecticut, and elsewhere. Now, on a trial basis, other cities have tried it. So, if you go to no city has tried it yet in Arizona because we haven't focused on Arizona. In all honesty, there's not many cities that have parking meters in Arizona. If you go to Texas, San Antonio, Austin, El Paso, Dallas is about to launch a trial. We have cities now, starting to try the technology. So there have been a lot of trials. and we are moving forward in negotiations with some of those cities.
Now, your company how large a company is your company?
We're not a large company, we have 30 people, we're a software company, so you don't need a lot of people.
Is it over the market, or is it a privately owned business, or?
It's privately owned right now. We anticipate at some point going to an IPO, we'll go to a public offering, privately.
Just go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you give us an idea of what the cost to archive would be? You mentioned we could do it for 5 days or 3 days. Could you give us an idea?
I could, I can't do it here on the spot because, there's some variables that come to play, one of which is really, how many devices you want to archive data from, right? So that's the biggest. It's all going to come down to a cost per, for a terabyte of data. But I could get back to you. I mean, if the city's interested in talking about that and transacting, I certainly not to give you kind of a rate sheet that would say this is what it would be.
Well, it's a good feature, but if we don't have an idea of the cost, then of course it makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. It's not very expensive. I'm trying to think of another city that's asked for a quote on extended service and what it was. And I want to say, we have a city that had about the same number of meters, and I believe their cost was, it was somewhere below $1,000 for like 30 days a day.
So it's not outrageous.
No.
It's doable.
Personally, I think you're crazy enough. There are some cities that don't want the data, they don't want the information because they have privacy concerns and that sort of stuff. My viewpoint is, unless you think that your own people are going to abuse the data, which I would hope that no one in the city would abuse the data somehow. And honestly, you hear about that all the time, but I've never you hear about rumors of that, but I've never ever seen a news story about some abuse of data that actually manifests itself in real life. I would do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, just when it comes to privacy, Arizona did have some issues on cameras on intersections. I don't know if you know this. Tucson had cameras on a lot of intersections.
Yep.
And it so happened they took pictures of certain people, elected officials, in not, in their best, I guess I want to say. And they were taken down because they weren't used properly, and these cameras will take pictures of certain things, or you'll be looking at certain things, looking into cars probably. You'll be able to see in the car, you'll be able to see other things, you'll be able to see, different things, and that's the only concern I have. And another concern I have, like you said, it's kind of like a smartphone. A smartphone in 2 years is obsolete. So what happens after that?
So first of all, because it's our equipment, you don't have to worry about it going obsolete because it's our equipment. You're not shelling out any money for it, right? Second, the thing is built for upgrades. So yeah, you're right. Your smartphone may become obsolete because the smartphone manufacturers are creating more and more different apps and things of that nature. There's nothing like this on the market right now. We're by far the market leader. Before this equipment ever goes, obsolete, I mean, we would have to make it obsolete because we're the only ones that can make it obsolete. In theory, you could put all sorts of apps on this. Nobody's going to do it.
But what are the chances of your company being obsolete if you only have 30 employees and we decide to change all the meters in the city and no longer we have the meters that we have there?
So so as you can imagine, we would have a significant investment, right, of putting all these meters in the ground. So we would only do an agreement that had a minimum of 5 years to it, okay? So, and that's because otherwise we don't earn enough of it on our investment if, say that you put the meters in the ground and you decide that, okay, we don't want them after 6 months or something. Okay? But, as far as, at the end of 5 years, they say, okay, that's it, time's up, we want to do something else, we want to go in a different direction, and you can do whatever you want. You could deal with another vendor, you could come back to us and say, we want a different model, a different version, if we've got different versions of models at that point in time. It's kind of whatever you want to do. And when you say obsolete, let's assume the worst case scenario, which I can't fathom. Let's assume that these things truly become obsolete, meaning technological obsolescence, they don't work anymore. Well, if they don't work anymore, that's going to be a breach of our contract with you. And you got the ability to say, well, now these things don't work. Let's say that the United States comes up with a different technology and decides that it's not going to use license plates anymore. It's going to use something different. Okay? And these things don't work. Well, guess what? Then you breach the contract. You could say anytime, let's get out. Right?
So if you have a 5-year contract, like you say, after 5 years, the 50/50 is still there, or you change that too?
I mean, we could change it at the end. I mean, who knows what's going to happen 5 years from now? So, I mean, what we like to do is we like to do a 5-year contract with a 5-year renewal, and the 5-year renewal is typically on the same terms. But you know, let's be honest, anytime you have a contract that comes to an end, there's always an opportunity for either party to say, okay, let's renegotiate this, unless one party has the ability to say, I want this to maintain without. One important part about the cameras that you mentioned about the
Yes.
the privacy. Let me just point out to you. So you're right that we can capture lots of images. Right here on the meter, this is the user cam we call it, that's looking at the sidewalk. So this would be what's looking at the storefront. If you really wanted to, we could actually put a camera here that would look out into the street. We don't have anybody who really takes advantage of that, but we could. If you didn't like that, and you said, okay, privacy concerns, I really don't like that, I don't want these cameras looking in the sidewalks. These cameras, which are the ones that are looking at the license plates, they're designed not to look at the street, not to look at the sidewalk. They're looking down like this at license plates. They're not even designed to capture the driver. They're designed to capture the car coming in and understanding when a car is coming in and capture the license plate. That's all those cameras need to do. So now I'm not going to say that inadvertently they can't get an image of something. They can, right? If somebody decides to walk right by the camera, they can. And if the angle is right, yes, you could possibly see, into the windshield of the car.
Or to open the trunk
Yeah.
of the car.
Yeah, I mean, well, you might be able to, but it depends. I mean, the reality is these cameras don't catch the image of the car sitting there. They don't catch the license plate of the car sitting there. Because by the time the car pulls up to a meter, and if this is the meter post and your car is right there, that camera will never see the license plate. That angle is too steep. It actually gets the images of the
As you're
license plate
parking.
when it's coming in and when it's leaving. So if somebody opened the trunk, the odds are all you're going to get is a picture of the bumper and not actually what's in the trunk, just because the camera angle would be way too steep.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a follow-up question. Can this system be hacked into?
I mean, I can't say. I mean, look, if you talk to government officials, I'm sure they would say any system could be hacked into. Even the NSA would probably say that they can be hacked into. So I can't say that it couldn't, but there's a ton of safeguards on it.
But if you do get hacked into it and our data is erased, who is responsible? You're going to be responsible?
So as far as your data being erased,
Mhm.
your data is going to be stored. I mean, I don't think anybody would hack and erase it. And it depends on what you mean by data. I mean, once the data that we house, we're not in the business of holding data. Okay, if you want us to hold data for you, we can do it, and we can archive it, and we would archive it, someplace else probably. But we're not in the business of capturing a bunch of data and holding on to it. For us, that's just an added cost. So what we typically do is we take that data, that license plate data, we convert it into numerical data, and we're done with it. And if you say, for instance, you've got, we could have a database of license plate numbers for a certain period of time, and if you said you wanted it for a longer period of time, we can hold it. But really, we're not interested in the license plate data. We're interested in how long did a car, in general, park at this space. That's the kind of data the city can use to say, we have X amount of cars parking here, every night at Sunday for, this is the space turnover, and this is how many, this is on average what the space utilization is at this time of day or this time of the year, et cetera. It's not actually keeping, the kind of data that you're talking about that somebody might want to hack into.
So Chief, if we decide to proceed with this for beyond the 30 days, you need to get together with the city attorney's office and make sure this hacking definition is in the agreement and it's clearly spelled out as to the scope of responsibilities of it. If we lose revenue, it's got to be their responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has to be with them if there is some kind of breach within the system.
And understand this too, when you say hacks and all that, for instance, the system is PCI compliant, which is, the credit card compliance. Saying, okay, so people can't hack in the system. So, I mean, it's not like we haven't designed the system to make sure that, that there's no hacking.
Yeah, but a lot of banks have said that though too.
No, you're right. That's why I didn't lie to you and say, oh no one could ever hack it. I mean, anybody who tells you that is in the technology field is lying to you.
Mayor?
There's no
Mayor?
system that isn't
Thank you.
somewhat.
Yes, so just one more question and then you can go. Yes, on, like you were saying about not only hacking, but you said, okay, who sends the ticket out to the owner of the vehicle? We send the ticket or you send the ticket?
So that depends on what you want to do. As far as who decides to send the ticket out, it's you.
Okay.
We're not in the business of generating
Okay,
tickets.
so right now you said you don't store data for too long. Okay, so how fast is that ticket sent out? Immediately or the next day or a week later or when?
So that depends on two things. Depends on how quickly you decide as a city that you're going to review and reject or approve violations, right? Because you can sit on that information if you want. Now, we usually put in our agreement that you have to process those things within 3 days, because the last thing you want is to have a week's worth of that of violations sitting there waiting to be processed and have some poor consumer who thinks, okay, I parked here, I guess I'm fine, I didn't get anything in the mail, and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later they get something in the mail. So part of it is how quickly you process that, and then the other part, it depends on who's providing the mailing and that of the tickets. We can do that for you if you want. A lot of cities already have an agency, whether it's a third party or they have an internal agency that actually generates and sends out notices and things, and they use that agency to send out these tickets. I don't know what Nogales does right now and which approach you would take. So you can contract with us, you can do it internally, you can do it with a third party. So it all depends on the parameters that you put on either yourself or a third party. If you want us to do it, we can do it. As soon as you approve it, we can go ahead and
Okay, question for the chief. Do we have somebody who's going to be processing those tickets, chief?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the plan is that we can have the parking officers or control officers part of the responsibilities on a daily basis. And just for example, they spend 2 hours in the morning and process those tickets from the day prior, and then they go about their duties. I also need to check with city court to see and coordinate and collaborate with them
I was going to
as
say
far
that
as
too.
to how it's done right now, and we can come up with a process. But you know, one of the things I'm interested in is basically there's two things I'm interested in. And number one is safety, provide safety for the community, and number two is compliance. So we're not really interested in the enforcement because, like Mr. Cassidy says, the enforcement eventually is going to go down, and the compliance is going to go up.
But we also have to consider accountability.
Exactly.
Okay, and how are we going to do that as a city, and to be, you know, to make sure that it's being done properly and not, you know, then, because as it is, sometimes the courts get full, you know, and I know they have issues with parking tickets as they are right now, you know, because if this picks up a lot of citations, you know, easily could happen because people have to get accustomed of using those meters and they might just ignore it. And even if the time passes, the time lapse that we're going to allow it to happen, say for the first 30 days, we're going to have a study on it. If we're going to say use it for 30 days, those 30 days are going to be crucial because that's where you're going to have to say, okay, are we going to be able to do it as a city? Not depending on the company, but as a police department, as our court system, can we handle this? Because in 30 days will tell you exactly. Only if you put it in one side of the first block of Morty, just to try it out.
Right.
You know, and you know, it'd be a good idea, but I mean, I see a lot of things that we're going to have to really look into, and the department's going to have to really look into also with the justice system. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, can I speak to the court system for a second?
Yes.
So, what you said was unclear when you first created the system, was that courts were going to get clogged with citations and with people appealing citations, and that because they weren't going to be used to the volume of this. It never happened. It didn't happen for two reasons. One, as the chief has said, you know, we spent all our time in these presentations talking about the citations and the violations and how you do it. The reality is citations go like that because people know that now this is just the new paradigm. This is what I do now. I go to a meter and I pay. And I pay because I know I'm going to get caught. So the citations actually don't end up being that high. But the other thing that comes with this is for a consumer now and for the courts. The consumer is now getting something in the mail that is going to be a citation, that's going to include visual evidence of them violating, okay, with all the payment information, all the documentation, etc. And so is the judge or a magistrate or whoever here would adjudicate an appeal. What we found is that when consumers are armed with that information, they don't appeal very often. And it's because the typical appeal in the parking industry is based on somebody saying, it's he said, she said. The meter was broken, I was only inside for 5 minutes, whatever excuse, it was raining cats and dogs and I had to get in. Well, guess what? With our system, it actually provides the consumer with so much more information to make an intelligent decision whether they want to try to appeal or not. They can go and they can tell the story, and they can say, it was dangerous. Raining, lightning, thunder, I had my 2-year-old in my arms, I wasn't going to sit there and pay at this meter. I had to run inside that store before something happened to me. Well, guess what? They got a photograph. So that's the case. Absolutely.
And it was sunny.
The magistrate can say, you can look at it, well, but suppose it is the case, but somebody can look at that and say, you're right. I understand why you did what you did. There's a health and safety concern, you were trying to mitigate it, and maybe you technically violated a parking regulation, but I think that you did the right thing, so I'm going to let you on. And like with the 5-minute thing, somebody says, I was only in the store for 5 minutes. Well, they're going to have a sheet that's going to say, here's a picture of your car coming in at 1 o'clock, here's a picture of your car leaving at 3:30. Somebody wants to go and say, I spent 5 minutes in the store and it was unfair that I got a ticket. They're not going to show up in court. So we had the fear, but it actually didn't happen that way.
Thank you very much. Mr. Corey, would you like to put you? Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Gregory Corey. I think a lot of you already know me. It was a great presentation. There's so many things that I'd like to talk about. I know this is a study session, but I could ask questions for half an hour. What I feel at this moment is, I'd like to say, I'm happy for the opportunity to speak, and happy that I know that this meeting happened and that I'm here, because I want to look forward to making good decisions for Nogales. Right now, Nogales is going through some very tough times, and it looks like the next year is going to be no better in my sight, business-wise. The thing that goes through my mind at this moment is I feel like I'm at a disadvantage. My heart has been pumping, sitting over there, because it seems like you're going to make a decision. I don't think you should. I think that there's other people that make parking meters. I also think that Nogales is very special in that they're on the border and they're dealing with people who are not telephone savvy, much less computer savvy. A lot of them are, but a lot of them are not. Yeah. And Nogales, we need to promote friendliness and openness. Mr. Cassidy says, we don't want this to be a gotcha. Boy, I think it's going to be a huge gotcha, if you were to ask me. And in the future study sessions or whatever you decide, I would like to be included, and so would a lot of my other neighbors, because I'm sure they have other good ideas. And we have always, well, not always, but for the last years, we've been getting very nice revenues from those parking meters. And I think if they're cared for properly, if they're administrated properly, they can do better. One suggestion I would have, and it's totally personal, why don't we give parking tickets on Sunday? We can do it. It would mean that everybody would have to feed their meter on Sunday as well. It's a question of informing our customers and getting on board to protect our city. And I really would not want to give half of the revenues to an outside company, even though they're going through a big expense and a big investment. I just don't see it as a good decision. And much less would I never sign a contract for 5 years. No way. That's my opinion.
Mr. Just
yes.
Since you're there,
yes.
basically, the questions you heard from us, the way I take it, okay, and I'm not sure, I don't know how the council feels, but I'm looking for facts, not to make a decision on it, you know, that it's not that easy, because I know how you feel, and I know as mayor, how the needs of the citizens and the needs, and I know the problems we've been having downtown for the past 2 or 3 years. So I'm very concerned about those things, but I know that what we're talking about here is we're trying to get an idea and see if it's feasible and stuff, you know. But later on, we'll come up with the idea if we do make a decision for a tryout or something, that'll make a decision. But if we do that, we will contact you and everybody else so that you can be part of that.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Corey, I concur with the mayor's comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lobo.
Yes, yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Corey.
Hello everyone, my name is Dia Jada. I'm from the Jada family here in downtown. A lot of you might recognize me. So I do have a question, and it's in regards to yellow zone parking. So if you put a cam stick on the yellow zone, and it takes me 4 hours to unload a container, and you regulate it for 30 minutes, do I have to worry about receiving a ticket for that? And then another thing is you mentioned that you will run media ads and educate the people of Nogales on how to operate these meters. But we depend mostly on Mexicans, not on Nogales residents, and that is a fact. So
yes.
85% of our employees, consumers come from Mexico, even probably more than that. So how do you expect them to be properly educated on how to use it when they can barely use the ones that we currently have, which is very simple as just a better coin in it. So that is my concern.
Yes.
I would love for Nogales to have this technology, but I see it as a ladder, and we're jumping over the ladder rather than taking it one step at a time. So an upgrade to these meters would be, accepting credit cards, following the Tucson model. If we do this, we're just jumping over the ladder and, taking on to something new that we have no experience with. That might work, but if it doesn't work, you guys are locked for 5 years and you're going to bear the consequences. So that is just my point.
Thank you very much, I understand. Thank you, sir. Yes, Councilman Hudson.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Again, they did change, and I hate to say this, they did change the meters in Nogales, Sonora, but I have no idea how they changed them. They changed them in Hermosillo, but I have, again, whatever reason, I have never parked a car on the street. So, but that would be interesting to find out what they do there. Again, yeah. How many meters are out there right now? I understand this is new technology, but I mean, I feel like we're the Shark Tank here, and we're dealing with, we're going to be your partner in this deal because we're going to be your first going in there, right?
So you'd be the first in Arizona. Okay, we've had meters, and you're right, we are a young company, this is new technology, nobody else has anything like this, all right? Right now we've got about 1,000 meters out there. We've handled over 3 million parking sessions. The meters have actually been, out there live working. Our first site was Vancouver, we did a small site in Vancouver since 2013. So, 5 years worth of data there and what have you. So, the technology is new, it's being rolled out. But it's been well tested, after having 3 million parking sessions. So, and I should say this as well too. Whether it's these meters or something like it, what you need to know is this is going to be industry standard, or something very similar to this will be industry standard anyway. What I mean by that is if you talk to the automotive companies, they're building their cars in anticipation of this technology. And they're embedding technology in their cars to talk to meters like this. So it will not be very far in the future, just a few years into the future, when some of this technology will already be talking to the cars that are coming out and the car companies are pushing that. And especially when you think about things like, some of these autonomous vehicles. There's no one in an autonomous vehicle who's going to step out and pay a meter, right? They have to have an automated way of this kind of technology is paving the way for automated vehicles. And also, just really briefly, I don't mean to belabor it, but these meters are really easy to use. They do accept coins. If you just walk up to that meter and you throw a coin in, you're done, just like a regular meter. And if you can operate a bank, you know, an ATM machine, you can operate these meters. It's not, there's not some magic to it or some, you don't have to do a PhD. It's designed, you know, very user-friendly. So literally, if you just walk up, you don't even pay attention, and you just throw a meter or a coin in the meter, but the only question you're going to get is an arrow's going to pop up on the screen, and in the language, it's going to say, do you want to pay for this space to the right or this space to the left? Assuming it's a dual space meter. So, you know, I understand the concern, but it's really not as intimidating as you would think.
Our next question was Chief Bermudez. You know, they gave us a little list here that basic for 2018 it was $56,000. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, how many meters were up during that time? Because I was always been accustomed to looking at the meters, and it was 140, 160, even going back when the downtown was very, very viable, it was up to the 200,000 a year. But how many meters were not working during the last 2 years?
There were quite a few, Councilman.
Would you say 50%?
Could possibly be.
So possibly it could have been $112,000 that we were getting.
Conceivably, yes.
Mm-hmm.
What happened there is with the changes in administration, and I'm not talking political administration, I'm talking about administration with the city, there was some, I guess, ambiguity as far as to, are we going to proceed with the meters? Are we going to fix them? Are we going to get a new system? Are we going to take them out completely? So basically, I was just waiting for my marching orders saying, okay, do we fix them? Do we not? What is it that we're going to do, right? And then we're talking about there was approximately time period of about almost 2 years that we didn't cite at all.
We gave no citation.
We get no citations.
Right. My understanding was no tickets available. There was no. What was the reason for that?
Well, the reasons why we weren't citing is because there was, I guess, we're waiting for collaboration and communication between City Court and the City Attorney's Office. Mm-hmm. See, our sole responsibility into the meter portion of it is enforcement. It's not setting tariffs. It's not setting laws or anything else. You give me a citation and we'll go out there and enforce whatever the state or the city charter dictates. That's our involvement in the parking meter situation also. So it was some, I guess in battle, for lack of a better word, between City Court and City Attorney's Office before they agreed to, okay, this is how much we're going to charge, this is what we're going to put in the citation. I mean, we were checking, weekly, monthly, quarterly at the end, because, I mean, we wouldn't get any answers until we started citing probably about a year ago again. And as it is, we went back and we did, I think, a month of outreach with the downtown merchants, with our customers, actually, to let them know that we were going to start citing in 30 days. So that's in a nutshell, that's the history behind this meter project that we're looking at. Now, what I'm interested in again is the safety aspect of it, and the part that the compliance part, not really the enforcement part. So, as far as to Mr. Jada's comments, I mean, I appreciate you guys being here, and I'm thankful for you guys being here, because obviously you are our customers. And that work for you guys, the community. But they can also put pesos in there. We're going to be, we will do a 100% outreach on this. And the only way we're going to find out is to do that 30-day pilot program, because if not, we'll never find out if it's a viable program.
Well, I think it'd be interesting also to find out what Nogales, Sonora does and Hermosillo does. Because whatever they're doing, I mean, if the people are accustomed to part of this already, then they would tend to understand it, right? Again, my problem is that this could have been at least double. Yeah. Because a lot of the people weren't putting money in there because everybody knew that nobody was giving tickets. Mm-hmm. So I would say this could have been a lot more, strictly because people said, why pay? There's not gonna be tickets. And whether you say, well, the people should have still paid, but that's not the way human nature runs, right? So,
And then I'll give you a perfect example. About 3 weeks ago, while doing some research to compile all this, file all this information, or put all this information together, I got off on Grand Avenue, right in front of AutoZone, right? And I was just trying to read the meter to see what it said inside. And all of a sudden, there's about 3 people that ran out of a storefront and put money in the meter. And I was going to cite them. Sure. I haven't given a parking ticket since 1985. They didn't know that though. So that's what I'm getting into.
So walk around the street.
The compliance part.
yeah.
So
no, but all I'm getting at is that could have been handled very differently. I guess whose fault it is or whatever, but it could have been handled very, very differently.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, let me just.
Okay, then that.
My name is Ray McCory. I'm a landowner downtown. I used to work downtown when times were good. But I can tell you that when times were good, rents were terrific. Now I'm making about 17% of the rents that I was charging when times were good. What I'm trying to say by that is that downtown is hurting. It's hurting tremendously, and I think everybody here knows it. We have to compete with shopping centers that have free parking and all kinds of parking. So it's my feeling that we're getting the cart before the horse here. We're going way beyond what needs to be done for the benefit of downtown Nogales. If anything, parking should be free to entice people to come downtown. We have to compete with shopping centers. There's another thing that one argument is that employees take all the parking space downtown because they feed the meter or don't feed the meter. Well, if we could provide some kind of parking for employees off the streets, that would be a tremendous help for downtown Nogales. I think what this council needs to be thinking about is how are we going to help downtown Nogales and draw people in, make it more beneficial for them to compete with shopping centers that are killing downtowns everywhere. That's my feeling. I think that this whole project is way beyond what Nogales needs. I think we can just table it. Let's talk about it in 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Were you going to say something?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think that for a while it was free, wasn't it? I recall some time ago, I don't know what data we have as far as that. Maybe Mr. Corey, Greg?
I'd just like to add, Raymond is my brother. We were partners. There was a few years when there was no parking meters at all.
Mr. Corey, you should so the people can.
Thank you. There was a few years when there was no parking meters at all downtown. And actually, I am in favor of having parking meters because the problem that existed at that time was that there's a lot of people who live in the United States, Nogales, Arizona, Rio Rico, who work in Nogales, Sonora. And they used our streets as their all-day parking. So when you wanted a customer to park, he had no place to park. So I know my brother knows that, and I know that I think the point that he's trying to make is we need to be as friendly as possible and as welcoming as possible to every customer. But I would not be in favor of taking meters out for that reason, because that has not changed. There's still people who work in Mexico who live in the United States, many.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a follow-up, and thank you for that information. I think that that's valuable for us as well. The other thing that comes to mind, and I don't know who brought it up, but it could have been the mayor that brought a good point with the privacy violations. Are our laws or our charter, and you mentioned this as well, Chief, are our laws, our charters, are they in compliance? Do we need to revamp that? Do we need to talk to our legal as well, and the court systems to address this. I think it's really a team effort with all of us in communication with what do we want? How do we want? Do our laws basically help with this situation or not? Do we need to revamp that?
And actually, I'm working with Mr. Barra and to find out if that does apply or doesn't apply. And that's where we're at right now. But I agree with Mr. Corey. If you pass, I passed by there this morning, if you pass by the first or the 100 block of West Street, all that area is filled with cars that just park there and they walk into Mexico. And the residents of those areas get there and they have nowhere to park. So same thing with the second 100 block of Sonoita, and sporadically on Terrace and sporadically on Crawford Street.
And Walnut.
And Walnut. So, Mr. Corey, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to obviously, you know, I have a vested interest in this community, and I have a vested interest in every single one of you in here. So the last thing I want to do is hurt anybody in here. But I want to provide the best service possible to our community, to the city, and make sure that you know, we do outreach. And my main concern is compliance, and most importantly, safety. Because I want to bring those customers into your stores by saying, you know what, if you go down to Corey's, we're going to be safe because we're being recorded. If anything happens, I can touch a button and I can dial 911, and I can have a face-to-face with a 911 operator or EMS or whoever the case might be. I think that in itself is going to be enticing for people to come down and change the perception that Nogales is a war zone, because I keep on fighting that. I keep on fighting that, and all this negative rhetoric that we have on our border, and that needs to change. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity, and I'm trying to make sure that I send that message that Nogales is not only safe because of the law enforcement and the public safety personnel that work here, but technology in itself is being a force multiplier to help us, and in the same time help you bring customers in, and you guys can keep on with your business.
Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Mr. Cassidy, good presentation. I just want to reiterate what Chief said. You know, we've talked about making this city more safer. I think this is a good point. Basically, it's going to be the honesty of the people parking there. Like Mr. Cassidy said, there's some people that park and maybe put half an hour and stay there 45 minutes. Now they're going to be basically justice is going to be served. And you know, what we've been looking at is economic development. You know, I think this is a process of us getting, you know, the security and the safety of the people. And one thing I was gonna ask Mr. Cassidy is in doubt, if a customer, like we said right now, if it rains or pours, and I had a two-year-old baby with me, you know, can there be like a status question, you know, I challenge this ticket for X reason.
Yeah, I mean, look, all our system does is provide evidence to the city of what's going on. So it's the city officials who will make the determination of whether they want to ticket for a violation that our system identifies. So to the extent that the city wants to form a policy around that and say, yeah, you know, in inclement weather and things of that nature, we're going to overlook this, that's fine. Okay. And, you know, the same, like, question came up before about parking in yellow zones. You know, if there's a yellow zone and it's enforced by one of these devices, and let's say that it's very common that for one reason or another there's parking there and the parking has to be of a 4-hour duration to unload a truck. Well, the right policy decision is not to say, okay, we're just going to give you tickets after 30 minutes. The right policy decision is to take a look at the data and say, what does the data say? How long does it take people to unload and load? And if it really takes 4 hours for a truck that's serving a vendor on that street, and you value that vendor, then of course you'd want to change the policy. And you'd want to say, no, let's make that a 4-hour zone. We have cities all over. Minneapolis is looking at this right now, and they literally have on one street, they've got a tattoo parlor, they've got a coffee shop, and then they've got a retail store. And they literally want to tailor this so that there's different durations of time allowed to park in front of each of those different establishments, because they recognize that if somebody's going to go to a tattoo parlor, they're probably not getting in and out in half an hour. And if somebody's going in to buy a cup of coffee, they probably don't need 3 hours to do it. And if somebody is shopping at a retail store, you know, maybe they're going to be in there for an hour. And the city's smart enough to say, well, wait a second, why should we be bound by some rigid structure that says that every space in the city has to be a 2-hour space maximum? They're looking at it more proactively, and they're saying, let's do what makes sense for the consumers and for the merchants, etc. And with this system, we can do it. Whereas right now, you can't do that. I mean, unless you want to have, you know, some kind of cheat sheet for all of your officers to know, okay, this is a, you know, this is a 4-hour space, and that's a 2-hour space, and this is a 1-hour space. And I mean, at that point, you're spending all your time trying to decipher and interpret regulations and not enough time out policing, right? So.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, the security is a real good area for me that I'm concerned. And I'm not going to speak about a particular business, but I've seen a particular business that has come out on social media that has been hit about 4 times, has been robbed, or attempts have been made. And I think that business is of course, getting very frustrated with that. And I did have intentions of talking to the chief about that. But we do need to, when we talk about economic development, we have to talk about security. And I think there are some things that, I don't think we have the whole picture at this time, but I think that we need that information and bring it back before the mayor and the council.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Just to sum up here, Mayor.
Okay.
I think it would be appropriate to just have Dr. Felix take the comments that were made today, and then at a future agenda, bring it back for a trial 30 days and see how everybody feels at that time, and then proceed from there.
Well, one thing that I'm going to be doing myself, I'm going to go downtown, and I'm going to talk to all the property owners one-on-one, because I need to get their feedback. You know, we can make a decision up here very easily. Easily we can make a decision, but they're the ones that are going to. We need to hear it, and I'm going to talk to them, and if they feel that they have security issues, or they feel that that it'll cause them problems, you know, I'll bring that back to the city manager, like you said, Mr. Banana, and let's see what we talk about, and maybe we can sit down again before we even put in an agenda item to make a decision, and revisit this just briefly, not as long as we did today. Briefly, since we already had the presentation, we don't need another presentation. This is something that I think we need to discuss amongst ourselves and some of the owners of the properties downtown, so we can get, and of course, the police department.
Yeah.
You know,
I concur with that. I think we need to discuss it, look at it, see what that 30 days says, and they might come back and say, the owners might come back and say, hey, we're not happy with this, even for the 30 days, and then, all right, we can make a decision, but we looked at all the facts.
Yes.
And I leave that up to the city manager to come and bring it before us.
well, with that,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I like the dialogue. It was good. And Chief, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you, Mr. Cassidy, also for your presentation.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just address the comments that Mr. Rojas made.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm glad to report that we made an arrest on that those burglaries this morning, sir. So.
That's positive, because you know, and thank you, Chief, because I mean that's positive for us. I mean it was part of social media. I was kind of looking at it, and I had intentions, of course, to talk to you, but you got to do your business, and I'm very happy with that.
We just wanted to make sure that we had a tight case and we were sure of the suspect, and we had an arrest this morning.
Thank you, Chief. Congratulations. Good job.
Good job. Yes, go ahead.
Just, Mayor, so Mr. Cassidy understands, basically this is the study session?
Yes, it's a study session.
That's
He knows that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. You know,
So with
I don't
that,
know if you were expecting us to vote right now.
No.
Okay,
I was
all right.
expecting that you're deciding whether you want to do a trial.
yes.
And then after that is when you
Well, we're gonna have to
gotta be
get
put
some
in
more
the agenda.
information through, between us and with some of the property owners downtown, and then we'll have the city manager come back to you.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yeah, we'll continue with this before our 6 o'clock meeting starts. It's right around the corner.
They have body cameras here.
We're gonna
Cameras are here.
go with B now, and that's presentation of educational requirements for
Thank you,
public
sir.
safety employees. Chief, Chief, where's it? Oh, there he is. Go ahead, Chief.
Sure. Quería que entendiera que it's got to be put in the agenda.
Oh, no, he knows.
Robert, who was that business?
En mi casa, ahí con el Indiola and Danny. They were hit like 4 times. Yeah.
They finally got it.
Yeah, they finally got
I think they hit the one next door to.
it. También, yeah, in that area.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to echo Chief Bermudez in congratulating you, Mayor Guarino, Councilwoman Lopez, Councilman Rojas with re-election, and Councilman Borjocas. I know that you all bring a lot of previous experience and service to the city, and you're returning to continue your journey in public safety, public service as well, and I thank you for that. Tonight we're here at the request of council to discuss some educational requirements for both fire and police as public safety. And so I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation, and it hopefully is brief. The first 3 slides here, we're going to discuss just what is in place already at the fire department in terms of educational requirements. And here you can see the 3 chief officer positions do require educational requirements. They're at those levels: associate's degrees for the division and assistant chief, and a bachelor's degree for the fire chief. So that is in place currently at that level. The next 2 slides are going to discuss our entry-level requirements. And we hire 2 positions for people to come walk into the fire department from the outside. And that is the entry-level firefighter EMT and the entry-level firefighter paramedic. And so the lower of those positions in terms of rank and pay is the firefighter EMT here. And these requirements that we have here, the first bullet point there, is in line with what you'll see across the state of Arizona. Virtually every fire department will require what you have here, except maybe some of the volunteer departments and some of those other agencies. And that is to have a minimum of an Arizona Firefighter 1 and 2 certification. And that is based on the National Fire Protection Association standards of what a firefighter should have in terms of skills, knowledge, and ability. And so to obtain a Firefighter 1 and 2 certification, you commonly here locally can go to Pima Community College or Cochise Community College. You do see them advertised in fire departments doing their own at times, but we generally see students that have gone through one of these programs. And while they are trying to go through the process of a certification, they are also gaining credits. So it's a dual benefit to them, is because what we actually need is certifications. That's our core need at the fire department, is we need people certified to do the job of a firefighter, but they also gain credits as they go through that process. And that's an evolution that we've seen over the last 20 years or so. And that can also lead to a degree, in this case a fire science degree, Associates of Applied Science. So the Firefighter 1 and 2 certification, Pima College is 20 credits, Cochise College is 15 credits. We also require EMT basic certification. Medical calls is over 90% of what we respond to now in the modern fire department. So it is important that everybody that walks through the door has at least that basic ability to operate on an ambulance. And the EMT is, as again, you can see 9 credits and 8 credits. And so these are 1 to 2 semesters each. I think they're both 2 semesters now. So, you know, you're looking at almost potentially 2 years of education somewhere in that time frame to walk through the door of the fire department. And then some of the other requirements there is we give them a task book once they're hired. That is a 6-page single line item book that they have to complete within their first year that covers everything from the proper way of answering a phone call and taking care of customers to advanced rescue of civilians in fire situations and everything in between. They need a driver's license, they need some of the National Incident Management System command classes, and then they need to be hazardous materials, first responder, basic wildland. That's generally included in Fire 1 and 2 in a modern course. So that is our core level requirements to walk through the door as a firefighter EMT. The second position that we try to hire from as much as we can is also somebody who already has paramedic certification. And the difference between an EMT, what we would call the previous slide, an EMT basic and an EMT paramedic, is the paramedic provides advanced life support to our patients. And in layman's terms, what I can tell you is that almost any care that you would get in the ER for the first 15 to 20 minutes in a cardiac arrest, our paramedics will provide that in the field. Almost any care. So it's a very advanced level of training. It's a year process, and that is what we need to make sure that we staff our ambulances with this level of care for our community, to both protect our citizens, but also protect our ability to provide ambulance service. So on top of, we do attempt to hire firefighter paramedics. When we can, we've hired 3 from the outside over the last year and a half, and we also try to get our internal people to also go to internal. I budget for 2 a year, every year, to go to paramedic school. But that's a difficult process. It's been difficult because they have to go through an acceptance testing, and then they have to make the decision that they're going to dedicate their life fully for 1 year. We do have 2 that are that did get in the process for the first time since I've been here, 2 that internally that made it through for the Pima class, which is great news for us because we really need that level of certification. But if we hire them off the street, so to speak, they will have everything that the first slide has, those 23 to 28 credits, plus 57 credits ish, 55 credits that they've gained in paramedic. And these are just credits gained through skill, and of course a degree broadens your perspective on so many other things, which is the value of it. But this can lead to a degree in paramedicine. The other can lead to a degree in fire science. So just a little bit of the core requirements that we do already require. Council had asked that we consider and look very strongly at professional development in the fire department, and a specific request to look at requiring a degree for the entry-level firefighters, an associate's degree. You know, it would be highly progressive for us to do this, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. There is not a fire department in Arizona at this time that's there yet that I'm aware of, and we have a pretty open dialogue with other fire departments. So, you know, we just want to be careful that we don't require so much that we hurt our retention and recruitment, recruitment efforts, and we're able to do that. So that would be my one concern on the one side, but on the other side, this would definitely help us with that progression of professional development and getting our people ready. We really need to look at the next generation to take over and lead the fire department. And professional development and continuity of operations and these things are very important. So again, this is one slide that talks about that entry-level requirement. I did meet with Chief Bermudez on this, and we talked about, since this is a public safety discussion, we looked at the rank structure for both the police and fire. It is just about exact. And we looked at what he has done, what I've looked at, what we have in place right now, and we tried to match that kind of as to the extent possible. And so, we're looking at that. Again, the pay and compensation study that's being done, right now to kind of look at that. And again, we have to be realistic. I mean, we just talked about the economic strains here in the city, so we have to be realistic about that as well, and we understand that. So I think that'll be important to look at that piece, and then also have a discussion here in the future, very soon future, about requiring this, and maybe looking at having these firefighters that we hire, giving them a time period where we don't just say, congratulations, you're hired, we'll see you in 3 years and you better have a degree. We need to say, we have a program in place with the provisional college. You have an appointment tomorrow with so-and-so, and we're going to get you started. And make sure that we support them in making sure and tracking their progress, so that we don't, we don't knock on their door in 3 years and have to cut them loose. That's what we definitely want to do. We want to support them in this. But we also need these certifications as well. We need both. We need the transformation of a higher education, but we also need these certifications, specifically paramedic certifications. So this is something I think that we absolutely should look at here when the time is right, and look at this. And again, I talk a little bit about getting with the Santa Cruz County Provisional College, making sure we have these support functions in place first, and also looking at the pay and compensation study. So another thing is, again, not putting the cart before the horse too much, is also look at our incumbent personnel. How can we incentivize and motivate them to take on this journey as well. And incentivizing education, of course, is a lot of times monetary, but you really want more than that, right? You want them to understand that it is transformational. And so that's an organizational culture thing that we have to keep working on. But you can tie it to promotional. These are just some options that we're talking about. Tie it to promotional requirements. It's kind of there already. We need associate's degrees for the lower division chiefs and a bachelor's for the chief. So there's that. We can look at our captains. That's our next level down. Look at pushing more paramedic certification as well. You can look at testing point systems. You can look at like a zone pay system where each rank has 3 zones, and maybe one of those zones includes a degree, and once they're at that level, then they get a little bit of a pay bump, or just a flat out educational stipend or something along those lines. So trying to incentivize that and put it as part of our culture and part of our organization. So just various different options. I'm not saying either one of those is the right answer at this point, but I just wanted to present that we are thinking about this. We do want to move forward with this. Again, talking a little bit about the benefits of it and the cautions. It is transformative, and the job description of the 1970s firefighter was must have a strong back and must be able to take orders. And while those two things are still necessary today in the modern firefighter must have good communication skills, good report writing skills, technology savvy. The technology of medical equipment. We are working with the county to have a drone soon. These things are very important, critical thinking skills, the things that you gain through a higher education. But again, ensuring that what our requirements are are in line with our pay and benefits and those types of things as well, and being careful with recruitment. Recruitment has been difficult. It's almost a generational thing. There's fire departments and police departments across the country that are having generational difficulties with recruitment. But we've worked hard at that to try to continue that, and again, we need both a local base. We need our high school students to be able to know the career path, to have the opportunity to go right into firefighter 1-2, right into EMT locally, and get a job at the City of Nogales Fire Department. We also want diversity as well, though. We want that local base, but we want to embrace diversity of new faces as well, to keep ideas flowing and innovation at its peak. So here are just some things that to talk about here. Some of the current needs. Continue supporting a robust tuition reimbursement program. Obviously, the city does offer $4,000 a year tuition reimbursement, and I can tell you that a lot of communities with the recession of 2007, 2008, during that time frame, did not cut those programs. I can tell you where I'm retired from another agency, and it was all, I have several loans that I wish not to speak of in my education pursuits. They just wasn't available to me. So we need to look about the good, and that is an awesome benefit that the city offers. And again, we talk about the pay and compensation study. There is a 3-year requirement. If we talk about trying to get people within that time frame, we might look at removing that in place of what I put here earlier was a service contract. I have spoken with legal about their opinion on that since I made this slide, and they're generally not in favor of that right now. So kind of delete that last part there. Again, continue working with the provisional college. The JTED program is now local. That's an awesome way as well of getting our youth involved in this. We have invited some universities in to provide degree assessments, transcript assessments, talk about what options are out there. We had one, September 25th, 26th, 27th. This one was focused on graduate programs. So we have trying to do some of that, getting that going. I just wanted to throw that out there as well. And one last thing before I open up for questions and comments is, while I have you, I just wanted to remind everybody and also inform the new members of mayor and council that we have been working through a 3-year fire department strategic plan. We are about 1.5 years in, and my estimates at this point is we're about 70% completed with this. This was very comprehensive. The employees of the fire department have worked very hard this last 1.5 years. And in some cases, in technology and equipment, the fire department has progressed 10 years at minimum. In a lot of areas over 1.5 years, and they put a lot of work into that. We also have the citywide strategic plan that I know you'll be aware of, or your incumbent colleagues and city leadership will inform you all of that. That citywide strategic plan was broader and had some really key things for the fire department in it as well. They integrated perfectly with the plan that we had already had, and we're working through both of those and making progress in that. So I've given everyone a copy of this plan except Councilwoman Lopez and Councilman Bojorquez, so I'd like to give you a copy here as I leave. And if anybody else needs another copy, contact me and I'll get one for you. So other than that, those are our recommendations at this point. I think it is a valid and needed item that we look at. And if there's any questions or ideas or thoughts.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Chief. I just want to make it clear, because
excuse me, I didn't.
I don't know if I'm getting a mixed message from you on this educational requirement of associate degree into the entry level, because you kept mentioning the statement that recruitment, you don't want to hamper recruitment. I'm still a believer that we want to find the best possible candidates that we have to enter into our law enforcement and firefighting division, okay? as a comment, I don't see any reason why this can't be in place. 2020 seems reasonable to me, okay? But I remember the first time that I don't see anybody in this room that was around at that time, but when we first wanted to get into the ambulance business, the city, it was the firefighters who were apprehensive about it and didn't want us to get into it because of the educational requirements, because now they had to have an EMT. And we forced the issue. We gave them good education. We brought down instructors to make sure that they all passed the test. They all passed the test, and then they were all content. Otherwise, we would not be probably wouldn't be in the ambulance business today. And look at the revenues that we're getting from the ambulance business. So I just want to make myself clear that I think that it's absolutely inherent that we look for the best possible candidates with the best possible education, with a robust tuition reimbursement to make sure that this community has more paramedics and more top-notch candidates for these positions. Now, in compliance with that, I also believe that during this comprehensive rate structure, that these educational requirements should be placed into consideration for that. But so I'm not getting mixed messages for you. I want to make clear to you that just one person out of 7 believes that we should have this in place by 2020. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Chief.
Yes.
When I went into the fire department in 1980, the fire department would send you to the academy. That's where you got your certification 1 and 2. They did it. You didn't have to come in with it. And then within 6 months, you had to be an EMT, which we all had to go through that. At that time, we had cross-training with the PD, because I was also a police officer, and some police officers were EMT. Remember that, Chief? Because we wanted to have more EMTs out in the field, and the city provided that also. You know, basically what you're saying is you're going to get your recruits coming in already certified and already EMTs before they go in the door.
Yes.
That's what you're looking
Yes. And then we do, so, and that's what we do, and that's the process that you see in almost every moderate-sized fire department to a smaller department in the state of Arizona. The bigger departments, Tucson, Phoenix, Mesa, they have a lot of resources. They have a lot of funding. They have a lot of extra positions and training positions and academy and live burn facilities and all these things you need to become certified. A lot of the bigger departments will require you go through their academy, honestly, 22 weeks, 18 to 22 weeks, where you're paying the instructors to teach them. They come out of that with the certification that we're already asking that they come to us with.
Yeah, that's the academy they would send us to. The one on Ajo.
Yeah, and that but now you have so much of those live burns issues that you need to do, so much of those certifications and stuff that almost every medium to smaller department in Arizona will require that you go grab it from a college program,
Yes.
quite often, or a fire department that has the ability to do that with live burn facilities and instructors and stuff. Get that first, and then come in. The only ones that are doing academies are the bigger departments. Some of the medium departments in the valley will share an academy. You'll get 4 departments that come together and pool their resources, and they'll share an academy, which has been successful. But smaller departments, we just don't have the money to do that at that point. So what we do is we bring them through the door with that minimum requirement, and then we give them on-the-job training. That task book that I spoke of has a lot of how Nogales operates. You know, what are the procedures here? What are the equipment that we have? So we do a very intense 1-year on-the-job probationary period to get them trained up.
I think that's very good, because if somebody really takes the time to train themselves before they even go up and apply,
yes,
I think you have the upper hand on that already, and I think that's a good idea to do it. Chief, do we still send our officers to the academy before?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Actually, we have 2 right now. It went from 11-week academy to a 12-week to a 17-week, and now they're there for 22 weeks.
22 weeks?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief. Chief, thank you very much. Is there anybody else?
Yeah, just one follow-up question to the city manager. On this presentation on current educational requirements, on the assistant chief for the fire, it says here an associate degree. You know, all of our assistants should be required, if you require the fire chief and the police chief to have a bachelor's degree, you should require the assistant chief to have a bachelor's degree, because you look at him and his performance, so when the chief leaves, we have somebody that can immediately qualify for the position, and we can move him up and give people from the bottom within the department to move up the structures who have that. So just for you to look at that, Dr. Phillips. Thank you.
Yeah, but he could be getting that degree while he's there, though.
No, but you're right.
Yeah.
But
To
here
be
it's only
prepared.
required an associate.
An
I'm
associate.
just saying that we should change that to be a bachelor's degree, so that he knows as he's
Okay,
working
that's
toward
good.
it, that he can get it and become a
Yes.
chief,
That's
and not
good
just
idea.
be an associate
Yes.
or an
Good
assistant.
point. Chief?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
I just got, the city manager figures, if it's all right with you, Chief, is that what you were going to say, John?
Yeah, we can delay the chief for the next study session.
Yes.
next month.
Is that okay, Chief?
Yeah. We added for next month, please. Yeah.
So we'll do C and D next time around.
And then the chief's half of the educational.
Okay, you have that one too?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take care of that next time around. All right.
So, just
go
a
ahead.
point of clarification, please.
Yes.
If we're going to redo C, what about the agenda item?
That's going to be two.
So we're going to change the agenda?
Yeah,
Is that
we're
going to
gonna table
impact
that.
you with anything?
No, sir.
Table.
Actually, the agenda item, I was going to request that it be tabled because that's not 100% accurate, and we were trying to get some information from the Department of Justice. But with the shutdown, we can't reach anybody. So
Yeah.
I don't want to give you any information that I don't have.
Since the government closed their doors, we had, the chief and I was going to mention that to the council. Chief and I had already talked about it because there's a little concern there on the monies.
Clarity, Mr. Mayor, please. Yes. The government is shut down due to the President Trump. So, clarity.
From your
Right.
friend?
Yeah,
Right
yes,
here.
Mr. Pelosi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So, let's,
Adjourn?
Come in and break. maybe?
yes, well, let's take a 5-minute break before we go in, and
Adjourn
we'll
the
adjourn
study session?
adjourn on the study session.